Hello, Guru Nation. Welcome back to another episode of Random Musings from the Clinical Trials Guru. I've got Peter Falzone, CEO of Ripple Science. We're going to be talking a lot about patient recruitment, patient retention, pain points in the industry. I mean, for those that have been watching and listening, you know that by far, the biggest issue in the industry in clinical research is patient recruitment. And then a distant second, but still important, is retention. And then it's all the other problems. So, Peter's company, Ripple Science, we're going to learn about his company, his background, why they're doing what they do. But before we do any of that, Peter, thank you very much for coming on today. I really appreciate it. And can you give us like a brief background as to who you are and how you got started in this space?
Sure. And thank you, Dan, for all the good work. I've been listening to your podcast, and my team has been listening to your podcast and reading materials. It's actually part of our training here at Ripple.
Oh,
So we
thank
were
you.
able to do. Yeah. So my background, some mid-tier companies, but also early stage startups. I Through that period, I've been the sponsor of many clinical trials. And in 2017, I was spending time back in Michigan, where I am from, and helping out a little bit at the tech transfer office, look at this technology, which was incubating and being spun out of the University of Michigan with a new startup company. And when I looked at it, that's the first time I saw Ripple. And when I looked at it, my reaction from through the lens of a medical device company CEO was, "Oh my God, I need this now at my company."
Hmm.
And that's how I landed here. About 6 months later, there was an opportunity to move from advisor to investor in Ripple. So I led the seed round, and I became so um, enamored of the opportunity and interested in the need out there for what Ripple does, that I left my seat and moved back to Michigan and took the helm.
Wow. Okay. So from CEO of a medical device company to advisor and now partner with Ripple Science. How long were you in the medical device space prior to getting into this role?
22 years,
Wow.
something like
Okay. And you were not CEO the whole time, right? That was towards the end.
that. I have been the CEO of several medical device companies. I think my first CEO position, well, I was the founder and president and CEO of a company called Coherent Japan. So Coherent Medical is a Palo Alto-based medical laser company that sort of invented the medical laser space, lasers for treating diabetics and age-related diseases. On with Coherent in 1991, and my job was to set up a rep office for them in Japan. And then we took the business direct. We took it from zero to about 23 million in a few years. So I was an early president and CEO. That was my first job in this industry.
Wow.
I worked Before that. I worked in finance at Toyota's headquarters in Japan. So
Hmm.
yeah.
Wow. Okay. Great background. And so, what was it about Ripple that made you, when you were the CEO of the medical device company, what made you say, wow, this is a game changer? Because most people don't do that. I mean, I'm assuming you were approached by Ripple, like most vendors approach pharma companies or any
Yeah.
company for that matter in research. Like, what made it, I mean, they weren't the first company to approach you. So, what was it about Ripple that made you kind of make such a drastic move in your career?
So you started this session by explaining that we know recruiting is the biggest challenge, bottleneck, limitation, right? And retention is the number two in bringing new therapies to market, drugs or devices. Uh, and my experience in industry was no exception to that. So when I saw Ripple, I immediately understood that, well, if my clinical trial teams if the folks out in the field, it's just like when we first adopted Salesforce for sales. Um, prior to Salesforce, we didn't really know what our sales reps were doing in the field. It was all in their own spreadsheets and their own heads and their own Rolodexes, right? So, and I saw the sales results. So with Ripple, what I saw was a tool that had been developed at the University of Michigan and was being used for behavioral research in the social sciences, but it had a dashboard that could tell a professor that had three months, and our founder was doing research on childhood depression. So she showed me the dashboard for his three studies, and he could see he had three recruiters, and he could see they had a target of recruiting 100 for study number one. They were supposed to do it in 24 months. They were at 12 months, and they were at 60, so they were ahead. Study number two was 200, 12 months, right? So I could see, and he could show me that most of the patients in this study are coming via Facebook ads. Most of the patients in that study were coming via a relationship with the local school. So I just translated all that into I was running an ophthalmic company at the time. We were doing molecular diagnostic and gene therapy studies. And I was like, I have three sites doing very early stage work for this gene therapy, this new CRISPR-Cas9 gene therapy project. They only need to recruit 7 patients each, but it's going to take them 6 months to recruit my 3 sites, 6 months. And if I just had a dashboard to see what they were doing and who was making progress, I wouldn't have to wait for my monthly report and my quarterly report to identify a problem that I should have acted on 3 months ago. That's in an industry where time to market is everything. It's like industry needs this.
It's a game changer.
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically it's like a dashboard to view in real time what the activities are at each site. So I'm assuming you can get to the site level, where the patients are coming from as far as referral sources. Are they coming? Does it require the site to put any effort into this, or is it passively work without the site involvement?
The dashboard is passive, right? Because if you ask, these folks are busy.
Yeah.
And, right, sponsors tend to give you a login to their portal and say, update these, update these statistics every week, every day. So Ripple, however, the foundation of Ripple is that it's a workflow tool. So people at the site, it was designed to put everything in one place for the study coordinator and the study recruiter. So all the potential participant or prospect information, it's the funnel, right? So if a school says, I want you to talk, I recommend person, this kid, and this it goes into the funnel, emailing and communicating, so screening, qualifying, consenting that potential family in Ripple. And then the dashboard gets created because you're working in Ripple. So it's a CRM. It's a registry, not of enrolled patients, but of all your contacts, because you may want to go back to a contact that didn't enroll in this study for the next study. It is a project management tool because each protocol is a different workflow, a different project. So you can set up by study different workflows, both for the pre-consent to be signed, what's the pre-enrollment first interview need to, how many minutes and who needs to be there. But as you mentioned, retention is the other key factor for completion of studies. So it becomes a project management tool. So once they're enrolled, the study coordinator says for protocol A, they need to come in 3 times over the course of 1 year, and this is what needs to happen each time. So basically assign tasks ahead of time to your staff, and you can schedule rooms and people automatically in Ripple. You just say, this is what needs to happen for each patient, and it gets scheduled. So the tool saves the team effort, time, keeps them organized, and the goal is to make it easy for them to provide the patient an easy experience. We want them to have a great tool so that they're keeping the potential participant and then the enrolled participant in the system.
And I'm imagining that this is a service primarily for sponsors, but if a site is watching, do you guys have any offerings for sites Like, is it free for sites to use if they want it, or can you only get it if your sponsor is using you guys for a study?
We actually took an unconventional approach. So a company like ours, and investors and folks in industry advised to me early on, sell to the sponsors and give it away to the sites. So, however, we took a different approach, and we took the approach that a company called Qualtrics took early in their development. So providing value to the sponsor is the secondary benefit in our business plan, the life of the study coordinator and the study team better. And that's what people pay us for. So we have 114 deployments right now. 113 of them are individual sites that are paying for Ripple because it saves them staff, time, and streamlines their process. We have a new customer that in the COVID era adopted Ripple. They're up in New Hampshire, and they're trying to validate a point of care COVID test in a month and a half on a project that normally takes them 20 months. And we put a press release out about it about 2 weeks ago. So they're paying for Ripple allows them to cast the net really wide and be really efficient in getting the word out and finding participants to participate in this study and get it done fast. So our value proposition is all to the coordinator and the study team first. If we get that right, Ripple because it makes their life better, they're paying for it, and the sponsor then can get the information. So down the road, when we're selling to sponsors, they're only going to be successful with it if their study teams want to use it. If they're pushing it down, there's going to be resistance. So we're really focused right now on the study team and making their life better.
So that's an interesting approach. So you went directly to the sites first and working your way up to the sponsors as opposed to the top down that we've seen. You know, that's pretty much the typical business model for vendors in this industry is let's go sponsor top down and then it'll eventually be pushed down onto the sites.
Well, it's universities. So our approach to the industry is similar to the approach at universities. So at universities, I'll give you an example. We're at Yale. We're just about to sign up our third study team. So we're talking to the Office of Research at Yale on a university-wide deployment because we got the teams using Ripple within Yale referred us up and said, this is a great tool. And then the Office of Research said, oh, we can make the entire, right, if it's making them more efficient, research is Ripple. The same is happening at the University of Michigan. We're talking to the Office of Research at Stanford, and a few more. So in industry, our industry customers are all doing work for sponsors and are referring us then to the sponsor. The sponsor, I can give you a case where a group in Chicago is doing, and retention improved so much, and their reporting got so much better that the sponsor took notice and said, what did you change? And then we got referred to the sponsor because the site had such a good experience.
Can you walk me through how retention improves due to Ripple?
Main job or challenge that we hear about from study teams related to retention is communications, especially when we're dealing. So we have quite a cluster of users in Alzheimer's research. And in this case, you have multiple points of communication. You're not only dealing with the participant in your study or the patient in your study, but you usually have a caregiver, maybe a nurse or a doctor, son or daughter, spouse, whoever it is. And there's a lot of coordination necessary to get that person in for their next visit. So sometimes you have to arrange transportation. Sometimes you have to limit certain times of the day. So Ripple makes it with if you're using Ripple, all that information isn't in notes somewhere or in an email. You have to search your emails to find out. Oh, I have to reschedule. Betty Doe emails to find out what the specifics are about scheduling Betty Doe. Ripple, you basically can, when you first encounter Betty Doe, you put all that information in Ripple and it reminds you what to do and who you need to contact ahead of time. So for complex communications and arrangements, or if you think about scheduling ahead, often for a patient visit to be successful, you have multiple the ability to coordinate all that in one system and not run around between different calendars and different spreadsheets is where Ripple really brings the value. Is some of our customers say it's all in one place and it makes it easy for me to keep track of the details.
Mm-hmm. So what's your typical client? Is it an academic site with hundreds of studies going on, or is it like more of the mom and pop with maybe 5 to 10 studies a year? Like what's your ideal client, or what's your typical client, I guess?
So we have a range, and it's such a giant market that we're not trying to be everything to everyone, but we are trying to meet the core needs of both the small independent research site. So I'll give you an example. We have a great customer in Chicago called Uptown Research. They do mental health studies for industry sponsors. They have a great team, super, super dedicated people. The doctor that runs it is all about quality. And Ripple allows them to, and everything else that they do, they're not like a super sophisticated, we got the world's largest CTMS and electronic data collection and e-binders, to give their customers, to give the patients a great experience and to deal with a difficult type of patient that's often difficult to communicate with. They onboarded Ripple, and we've interviewed them, we've written a case study about them, but I think last time I talked to Diane, who runs the office or runs the practice, said that Ripple increased their productivity by probably 50% in the first year. Wow. And they just renewed and added more seats. So they're growing, and their business is growing. So that's a very typical customer for us. And if we can get that right, and we can make Diane, who doesn't pay for software, invest in Ripple because it's really worth it. That's an important box to check. Second is we have a CRO called Aura Clinical, and they are an ophthalmology and ophthalmic focused CRO. I think at any one time they're doing 100 to 120 studies. Okay. So we have to be able to service that customer too, and the reporting and the dashboards and the functionality and the way that Ripple is actually implemented for them is very different than it is for Diane at Uptown Research.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, that'll be, I guess, the next phase of your guys' growth is basically become a household name at the site level. There's not too many actually vendors that sell primarily to sites, but I can see around patient recruitment and retention the value adds in those cases. So it'll be interesting to follow your career and to follow the company's trajectory and see how Ripple kind of evolves over the years. I mean, where do you think the industry's headed? Like as far as virtual trials and these kind of things, like where's Ripple's role in all of this?
Virtual and remote is huge right now. And, when COVID hit, everyone just sort of everything stopped in March as we were all trying to figure out where, what's happening. And what we noticed at Ripple immediately was that the majority of our large accounts usage was up, not down. So we got on the phone with them, and it's because teams had to go remote with very short notice. And many of them at large institutions had difficult time accessing their systems and their data. But, we're up in the cloud and they'll log on. So they had internet connection. They didn't have to go through a VPN. They could just get on Ripple, secure all their patient communication information there so they can start communicating what's happening with the study. whether it's delayed or rescheduled, or whether their next visit is going remote. And then that's where we also have recently released several features that allow Ripple to help them transition to virtual patient visits. So they can answer questions in a secure with it, on a form that's sent via secure web link that's all HIPAA compliant. Or we have Google and Outlook calendar integrations where if you have a Zoom account or another way of communicating with folks, you can set up a meeting right in Ripple using your calendar integration.
Right in Ripple. Yeah, that'd be cool to see how these, how these technologies enable sites and enable industry forward during this time and even beyond. I think a lot of the tools we're using now are going to be here to stay going forward. So thank you very much, Peter, for coming on. I really appreciate it. I appreciate your time. And if somebody wants to get a hold of you, I'll have your LinkedIn profile underneath the show notes, so you can reach out to Peter. And yeah, I mean, we'll definitely be in touch because I think this is kind of a cool idea.
Or just email me at peter@ripplescience.com. Always here.
I will put the email underneath in the show notes as well. So thank you everybody for watching and listening, and thank you Peter for your time, and we'll talk to y'all later.